Okay, guys, welcome back to Suicide Prevention Punchline After Show. Zara Khan, comedian, Frank King, comedian, and our special guest today, Jonas Barnes, comic, in LA as we speak, knocking it out of the park, apparently over and over and over, swinging for the fences. Didn't think it was going to go that way, but it has. We're all delighted. First
Thank
time
you.
Whoa,
on stage at the Comedy Store.
I know what we should talk about.
Okay.
Okay. We should talk about cancel culture and Dave Chappelle special, and I haven't seen Bill Burr's yet, but I'm assuming that you guys have, and what it's doing to comedy, because that's a hot topic right now, so we should talk about that.
What's
And
cancel
also-
culture?
So, and also, didn't you just make a post about that, Zara? I think
She did.
You posted about that.
Yeah, the idea for my third TED Talk, but I changed my mind, and I don't want to do a TED Talk on that. I don't want to get involved in that. I don't want to. I have enough haters.
For me and everybody over the age of 36, what is cancel culture?
Cancel culture is basically when you don't like when a group or a person says something which you find offensive. So what you do is you try to boycott them so that way they get canceled.
Oh.
So you literally
right?
tried to affect their career because you didn't like something they said.
Whoa.
Yeah. So,
Well-
Frank, Jonas, did you guys watch Dave Chappelle's special?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
I did.
Frank,
I did
don't know
not.
if you're-
Guilty. No, I
Okay.
did not. Guilty. I've seen mixed reviews though. From some comics love it. Some comics, yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you guys think?
Jonas, I'll let you start.
Okay.
You've been doing it a lot longer than me.
Well, okay, so I watched Dave Chappelle's and Bill Burr's special. I admittedly liked them both, but I do understand why people disliked them. I can kind of see both sides of it. I personally was a fan of them both, but the biggest problem with them that I think a lot of people are seeing, and also that I did notice myself, is that it's a lot of old rich guys bitching and complaining about is like, not really affecting them that much. And it seems like it's a little out of touch just based off of like the thing about Dave Chappelle's special is that he did do something that I feel like all comics should ultimately have as a goal. He joked about whatever he wanted to joke about.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't hold back about it. He literally was his own voice. It was his own thing. He joked literally about whatever he wanted to joke about. So he didn't censor himself. He didn't hold back. He didn't do any of those things. Now, I think also a lot of the stuff that I wouldn't say a lot. I would say probably 15, 20% of the stuff that was on the special was pretty stupid. Like, I think Dave Chappelle's brilliant, but there was at least 20% of that special that I thought was just bad. Like, he did a couple of things that I thought were just dumb. Like, it wasn't even that they were offensive to me. I don't really get offended. Like, I talk about some really messed up stuff, and I have an extremely thick skin, and I look at everything in the realm of humor, so I don't get offended by stuff. But I can definitely see, like, a lot of the stuff that he said on there, or, again, not a lot, like a small portion of what he said on there was very dumb. Like, it just literally wasn't funny. Like, it was just him yelling and bitching about stuff that really didn't need to be bitched about. Like,
Yeah.
Bill Burr did the same thing. Yeah, Bill Burr did the exact same thing.
Well, and
Interesting.
Eddie Murphy after Delirious, was that the first Eddie Murphy special?
Was it Delirious or Raw? I don't remember which
Raw
one.
was the first one, I think. Delirious was the second. He said that whichever one was first was amazing. The second one, it was okay. And he said the problem was the first one, he was still talking about real life. The struggles of the average guy and gal.
Yeah.
By the time he did the second one, he goes, nobody wants to hear what the fuck went on in the limo that day.
Right.
Yeah, so it's when you're not involved in the struggle, And
it's like, dude, you're a billionaire. Like, you're a billionaire and you're bitching about stuff about people that deal with, like, paycheck to paycheck jobs. And also, like, at this point, I'm sorry, Dave Chappelle is so rich that any minority issues that he had, sorry, dude, those are out the window at this point. Like, you've made enough money to where you've surpassed that. Like,
Yeah.
You know, you're not getting the problems that you talk about that he's bitching and complaining about on stage. Like, he just doesn't have those problems in his life anymore.
Yeah.
So it comes across super disingenuous. And then Bill Burr was just being loud and aggressively Irish.
Yeah, that's him. That's yeah, I love his stuff. First joke I ever heard him say, I can't believe I didn't know who he was 10 years into his career, 15 years. I didn't realize there was anybody that funny that I didn't know. And I tuned into YouTube, and first joke, I came in the middle somehow, and he goes, "Yeah, my mom says to me, can't you be more like your father?" And I go, "Okay, fuck you, I'm leaving." Okay, I'm in. I'm a Bill Burr fan. After I just one joke.
Yeah, Bill Burr is he's brilliant, and so is Dave Chappelle. I just think both of these specials kind of had that tone to them where it was like, you know, you're complaining outside of where you live now. Like, you know, you don't live in that. And honestly, anybody that's been quote unquote canceled at this point, anybody that has actually successfully been canceled is only one person. That one person is Bill Cosby, and he fucking deserved it. Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, dear God.
Aside from him, nobody has lost their career. Even Louis C.K., who did some nasty shit, still has a career. He's still selling out clubs. He's still making a lot of money. Like, even he didn't lose his career. So cancel culture, I think people are bitching about it way too much. I think people are way too afraid of it. Like, it's a mild annoyance more than anything.
Yeah, I can't imagine somebody getting. I tell you what does annoy me is colleges and comedy.
Mm-hmm.
I guess Chris Rock's not doing them anymore, and Bill Maher's not doing them anymore because I guess people get offended.
Didn't Seinfeld make a comment about colleges being too PC?
Yep. And I was on a campus, Jonas, at the University of Montana Billings, doing a college suicide prevention talk. And I'm riding around with two guys who are taking from radio station to TV station, whatever. And they go, "Hey man, you're comics. Does it bother you? Do you ever get in trouble on college campuses? People give you a hard time about being a comic, coming on. Somebody get offended?" And I said, "You really want to know?" And they go, "Yeah." And I go, "Well, I'm a comedian. That's true. And if I was doing stand up on a college campus, I'd be careful. But I'm on campus to talk about suicide prevention. I'm on campus. They're paying me for my lived experience, my opinion, and my advice on suicide prevention. I'm on campus to save lives. So if they got a problem with that, fuck them."
Yeah, that's great. But here's my problem with that. You know who has not been doing colleges for probably the better part of 10 years?
Who?
Chris Rock and Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah.
They haven't been doing colleges. So I'm sorry, I don't give a shit what Jerry Seinfeld says about PC college crowds because he doesn't do colleges. If you want to tell me that if you want to get a handful of comics that are in NACA that are doing college shows all the time, if you want to have them tell me that PC is a big problem in college audiences, I'll listen to them all day long. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm sorry. Jerry Seinfeld hasn't done a college in probably at least a decade.
Nor does he need to.
Right. He's way past it. Chris Rock does not do colleges. Chris Rock sells out arenas. Okay. Do you think Kevin Hart's doing the University of Indianapolis? No, he's not. Okay? Like, it's not like, so that's like, yeah, again, that's the same thing. You're bitching about something. He's bitching about something that he doesn't even live in. He doesn't even live in that world.
Yeah.
So it's like,
I think for me, like, I'm a big mental health advocate, and Jonas, I know you have jokes about suicide. Frank, I don't know if you have jokes about suicide. I know you talk about it on college campuses, but do you, on your cruise ships, do you joke about suicide?
I do cruise ships, Jonas, about 12 weeks a year on Holland America. No, I just do. They don't pay me for the jokes I tell on a cruise ship or at a corporate comedy gig. They're paying me for the jokes I don't tell and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yep.
Because it's got to be PC and HR friendly. And every now and then, Jonas, somebody will say to me, some meeting planner, "We're paying you how much money for 45 minutes of just jokes?" I go, "First of all, you're not paying me for 45 minutes. You're paying me for 7 years of beer bars and pool halls and honky tonks and drunk idiots scream and tell us some jokes we can dance to. And number two, you're paying me so when I get done with my job, you still have a fucking job. Because you hand a microphone to a comic, they can do a lot of damage before you can cut that thing off."
Yeah.
So yeah, no, when I'm on the cruise ship, they're paying me just to be, because somebody 8 in the audience, somebody 88, and so it's got to be. It's the reason they pay well is because it's a delicate balance. It's a tightrope to not offend anybody on a ship, and these people
That's
from
a
all over the
hard job.
world.
That's a very hard job.
Yeah, so and I do a lot of audience work for that reason.
Yeah.
I guess so. One thing that I'm like worried about is that like I didn't joke about mental illness for a long time because I didn't want to offend anyone and I didn't want to do it incorrectly. And then I got so badly depressed this year that I just started writing about suicide because that's, what was on my mind. And it was actually healing to be able to joke about it, no matter how horribly dark it got. That, like, I'm concerned, though, that my status or reputability as a mental health advocate might go down because people might say, oh, well, Zara, she makes jokes about suicide. She's not a good mental health advocate. But at the same time, I do want to joke about what I want to joke about, and I'm not really sure what to do about it.
I think the balance between those is that you're not making fun of suicide.
Yeah.
You're not making fun of mental health. You're not making fun of depression. You're not making fun of the actual ailment or of the actual issue. What you're doing is commenting on your own experience with those issues. And you're showing people also that there is a light side to the dark. So it's a difference between where you direct your joke. So like when I make my joke about suicide and I talk about my suicide attempt, I'm not making fun of anybody that's ever tried to commit suicide, nor am I making fun of suicide itself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm punching into a part of it that is all about my own personal experience. I mean, I'm making a joke about how like I wanted to end my life because I felt like a failure and I ended up failing so bad that I killed something, like, so it's like, it's a bait and switch about it, but it's also 100% true. And it's the same thing if you talk about depression. It's the same thing if you talk about any other mental health issue. As long as you're not actually poking fun at the mental health issue itself, then you're golden. Like, you're fine. If you're talking about your own experience being somebody who's going through depression or being somebody who's going through bipolar disorder or going through schizophrenia or insert thing here, if you're only using your experience and showing people your like actual thing that you've lived through, then there's nobody to offend because you're not making fun of anything that other people are going through, and you're also not making fun of the actual ailment. You know what I mean?
Yes. And I, in my act, Jonas, or my suicide prevention keynote, I say, runs in my family. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old when, she trigger alert. She'd crawled into a refrigerator, old Loctite, pulled the door to behind her, tried to claw her way out. So my mother opened the door, not knowing she was in there, and I'm standing there. She pinned me to the floor.
Yeah.
So people go, have you ever been impacted by a suicide? Yeah, the bitch fell out of the refrigerator on me.
Right.
It's, I get some of this from the neuronormal people, but it's my story.
In a dark situation. That's what you're doing.
People go, I tell people I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like. I pause. Spoiler alert, didn't pull the trigger. Gets a nervous laugh.
Right.
A friend of mine came up afterwards one time. Glenn Friesman's a mutual friend.
Glenn.
And he goes, how come you didn't pull the trigger? I go, could you try to sound a little less disappointed?
Right.
Which is one of the jokes so I think you're right, Jonas. As long as you're joking about yourself, your own lived experience, you're not making fun of the, Plus, if you're a comic, you can make fun of any group you belong to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's really what it comes
Seattle disagreed because I actually, when I went to Seattle, and it was a while ago, I think I was only a year into comedy, I told some terrorist jokes, and these Seattle people came up to me and said, look, it's offensive towards Muslims to make jokes about terrorism. And I was like, excuse me, I'm Muslim. It's offensive to me when you come tell me these things. Think about that. So I feel like we can have the logic to be like, for X, Y, and Z reasons it's okay, but there are people that for some reason just don't hear it and still will insist on that it's not okay and that we need to change. And
that's-
maybe I just need to be like, fuck them or something like that. Yeah. See, I said the F word. I could do it.
Jonas,
Yeah.
that's the first time I've heard Zara use the F word. You brought out the best in her, my friend.
I did have brought it out, man. But here's the thing, like, and this is one thing that goes back to the cancel culture thing. So, like, right now, there's a news story about a comic that got hired to do SNL, and his name is Shane Gillis, and
Yes.
it's all over the news. And I know who Shane is. I've performed with Shane. I've worked with Shane. I've seen a bunch of sets from Shane. He is a good comic. He's actually very funny. He's got a great set. He's also not even remotely clean. He's not even close to that. He's dark. He says a lot of fucked up stuff on stage. That is his act. Like, that's what he is. Now, granted, what he said on the podcast was not even in the vicinity of funny. It was just him bullshitting with his friend and being, you know, a douchey white guy, which is fine. Like, that's what that clip was. That is. But here's the thing. If they would have done even a minute amount of research, they would have known that that's who he was as a comic, because it's not like he hides that. Okay. So what I've said about cancel culture, about this whole thing, is that if you're afraid of cancel culture, you're hiding some shit. Okay. If you're a scumbag, like if you have scumbaggy material, if you say really dark, messed up stuff, lean into that. Like, be that person and don't hide it, because that's who you are. That's what your act is.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at somebody like Jim Norton, perfect example. Jim Norton is one of my favorite comics.
Yep.
You know what Jim Norton's not going to do? Saturday Night Live. He's not going to be that guy. And if anybody ever tried to find anything on Jim Norton that was cancelable, it would be literally insert thing here. Okay. He wouldn't care. He would look at him and be like, they would be like, are you going to apologize because you said this? He's like, fuck no, I'm not, because I said more of it on this special on Epics. Go ahead and check this out. You know, like, so if you're going to be a person who says messed up stuff on stage, when I say messed up, I just mean dark or dirty or whatever.
Yeah.
It's kind of what Frank said. Be that comic 100%.
Lean into it.
Yeah, and if somebody tries to tell you that you said something bad or you said something dark or you said something whatever, like, when you try to apologize for it and you apologize yourself into a corner, you look like a jackass.
Yep.
Just be like, nope, that's what I said, and I'm probably going to say it again. Like, you know, like, I'm not saying it to be hurtful. That's just what my voice is, you know. And now, granted, if you did just mess up and say something you didn't mean to say, that's a whole different animal.
Yeah.
Then it's
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah, you know what? I actually shouldn't have said that. I didn't mean to say that. If you look at the rest of my comedy, you're not going to see me as that person because that's not who I am. Like, you know, sorry, I fucked up. But if you're this person that's already dark, it's like there's no point in actually apologizing for that. Just be who you are.
Jonas, one last question before we go. I was going to ask you about your photography, because you had some, when you filled out the pre-podcast questionnaire, you had some pretty decent credits in photography.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I started doing photography a couple of years ago with a local band in New York. I went out and I just did their pictures for one day, and I kind of realized that I remembered that I was actually decent at photography. I was like, I hadn't done it in years, and then I was like, oh shit, like, I'm actually good at this. I forgot, so I'm going to do this more. So I started going out with just that band, and I started doing like more and more of their photography.
Yeah.
And like really honing in on what I actually remembered from the past. So because of that, I ended up getting some pretty cool gigs for photography. I do live band photography. I do headshots if people need them, but it's mostly live band photography, and then I do cityscapes. So I go around cities and I take pictures of different parts of the city. But yeah, I've gotten to work with Tenacious D. That was crazy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and that was that was so crazy, and the way that happened was even crazier. About 4.5 years ago, I was doing a street event thing, and I was trying to like help a comedy club get like more foot traffic.
Yeah.
Off of this thing. So I was flagging people down and I was telling them about the club and blah, blah, blah. And I reached out to this one person. I was like, hey, would you like to come to a comedy show tonight? And she was like, I'd love to, but I'm only in town for 2 days from Los Angeles. And I was just bullshitting with her. I was like, oh, what are you doing in LA? And then she was like, I just got off Festival Supreme, which, if you don't know what that was, it was Tenacious D's Comedy and Music Festival.
Oh.
So like my little brain started just like connecting the dots, because I was like, oh shit, like I love Tenacious D, I love Festival Supreme. I was like, oh, what were you doing on the festival? And she was like, I'm their booking manager. And I was like,
Hello.
yeah, I was like, oh cool, like, you know, like small world, blah 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 blah. And then I got her information, and I stayed in contact with her over the years on Facebook, and like, you know, like I actually, you know, started to like talk to her and like talk to her more like just as a person, not just like, you know, Tenacious D's booking manager. And then sure enough, they ended up playing Brooklyn, and I just reached out to her. I was like, hey, just so you know, like obviously I'm a big fan, but I would love to do photos for the show if that's possible. And then I sent her some of my samples from the band that I was doing in New York.
Yeah.
And just like that, she was like, yep, I can put a photo pass on the ticket. Let's, you know, do some pictures. Awesome. The pictures came out good, and then they ended up sharing them on their social media on Instagram.
Nice.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was one of the coolest experiences of my life, by far.
Well, let's do this again. We did it for the podcast. Tell people where they can find you, and also where they can find your photographs.
Yeah, photos specifically, I post them all over Instagram. You'll see the ones from Tenacious D on there. It's at Jonas Barnes Comedy on Instagram. Also, look me up on Facebook. You'll see my face on the profile picture. It's just comedian Jonas Barnes. If you're looking at like facebook.com/comedian Jonas Barnes. And then on Twitter, I do a lot on Twitter with mixed martial arts stuff and combat sports. That we didn't get much into that here, but I do that. I talk a lot about that stuff on Twitter. So just at Jonas Barnes on Twitter.
And I assume you do child's birthday parties and church picnics, I believe.
100%. Every Sunday you can see me at the Mormon Tabernacle Church of your local city.
Jonas, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on Suicide Prevention Punchline and the Suicide Prevention Punchline After Show with Frank King and Zara Khan.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you like what you saw, please subscribe, rate, and review. And we will see you next time out. Zara, bye. Jonas, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye. Have a good one.
See you guys.